Hi, let's blast off to a new adventure to find a Vallhenge, and let's do it with this rocket, which is quite huge but flies very nicely, actually handles quite easily. Its predecessor was much worse in that aspect. So I had to use a somewhat shallower ascent than I wanted to have enough fuel for this, so it's a little bit tight. But actually it works fine every time I try it, so I think it's okay. So this causes these effects because I'm going very fast, very low, and it's almost circularized, and there's a reason we have to do this roll, and that is, we'll see it soon. So it's almost at the point to circularize, and here it is. Yes, those were RT10 solid boosters. I use them as separatrons. So going to Jool is very much similar to any other planetary transfer, but here, because of the high inclination, we cannot completely do a tangential match of the orbit. So the problem here is that we have to have a compromise between the optimal orbit and the orbit that is in the same plane as the target is. And the way to solve that is to have a somewhat higher orbit where we can wait, because we are going slower. So this is in a way a wasted fuel, and we have to have more fuel to break from this higher orbit, because it will require more fuel to do the orbital insertion, but we didn't have to do the plane change, so we spared fuel with this. Actually, I will have to do it later, because on a specific reason I want to do later. But even then, we had the opportunity to use the Obert effect, and that helped us a lot. So around, let's say, maybe around 300 meters per second remaining in this chemical booster stage, and I wanted to use that to the fullest. So I let it fall to Jool for a while. By the way, it was 6 minutes to get here, and I felt it was right. I could use up the fuel, and I let the periapsis fall intentionally, so this stage with the separatrons will hit Jool instead of orbiting here forever, and no debris this way. I had to raise the periapsis, of course, again, but that's a relatively minor adjustment. So there will be no error capture, because whatever I tried, I didn't manage it. I just turned on the thermal menus. So I couldn't do it with this ship. It simply exploded all the time, because it simply cannot slow down this fast. Even about 193 kilometers altitude, it just exploded with the largest heat shield. This is a very long burn, 7-minute burn, but it works. So instead of aero capture, I had to burn around, say, 700 meters per second fuel. Now I have to be in the same plane as well, just around 1.5 degrees of plane change, and after that I realized that I'm in sync with Val, so I cannot make a rendezvous. So I had to change the orbit a little bit, also to avoid late, because it was meddling and there. And this is what I like in the Jool system. All these moons, they are very nice to have. You can use them for sync-bys, you can transfer between them, and they can even cause problems in your transfers because they are there when you don't want them to be there. So here I was playing with this to get it working, and finally after some adjustments I got that rendezvous, and here it is. So, but the problem with this orbit was that I wanted a polar orbit, because Vallhenge is so far south that an equatorial orbit is out of the question. Normally I would have used this orbit what I had, but it was a huge pain that I had to change it to this polar orbit. But if I do it far away, it's not that heavy on the juice. So finally in the sphere of influence, and just use the node to have an estimate of the speed I need to change. And maybe I started a little bit soon, because after a few minutes, this is an even longer burn. So after a few minutes you realize that the periapsis is not coming closer, so it was around 2 minutes 20 seconds, so I had to stop for a while until I caught up with it, because it was moving far away. I also had to keep burning a little bit up, because otherwise I would have lost the 60 kilometers altitude that I had here, and I need that for the time acceleration. And it turned out I didn't need a time acceleration, because I was just in position for a landing, so I had to transfer the crew in a hurry. Just a few checks, and yeah, I detached the lander and activated its pollens. The nice thing in this arrangement is that I have the roll axis free for navigation. That is free, so you don't use it for anything, and the other two axes, pitch and yaw, I can navigate. One axis is so the panels are moving on one axis, and with my roll axis I can substitute for others, so they are always lit. They are always 100% lit, especially on this orbit, which is just above the terminator, so it's always lit. 100% sunlight all the time. I could even afford to have these lights on all the time. So I had to do this plane change to get to the site correctly, otherwise I would have missed my target. And this lander has far more delta V that is needed for this mission, so I could easily do anything what I wanted. At this point it was already visible. Was visible. Yeah, it's there. I'm not sure that it's visible in the video, but it was clearly visible for me. So I realized that's somewhat short, so I started to burn up, but yeah, it was close enough. So getting close, and finally landed. I got Jeb out first to make some reconnaissance on the site. It was around 300 meters off, so it's not that bad. After that I planted the flag as usual. And went back to get out all the guys for just a crew shot. Yeah, I was curious whether I could see the Carbus from another viewpoint, but he was there. Unfortunately, there was not enough place to get one antenna to. There is no 4-man capsule, just a shuttle style cockpit, and it is not very good for this. It's too big and it's not symmetrical. But so I had to go back because there was not much time left until Val rotates under the orbit of the remaining cruise stage. And unfortunately it was not in position, so I had to go above it to wait until it gets there. So this wastes some fuel, but otherwise I would have needed to do an inclination change. I didn't want to do. So around half an orbit I had position. I'm not satisfied until it's around half a kilometer or less than 1 kilometer. And here's the run and the rendezvous. It's not Apollo-like because I was in a higher orbit, but it turned out nicely because it was brightly lit. This is very rare. I always have the worst conditions. Just a little bit of corrections. And easily done. So I transferred back the crew, and I transferred also the remaining fuel back, and I had some trouble with this to Jool is rising. So to get this to all tanks equivalently as I could, but it turned out quite well. And after that I wanted to detach this lander to crash on the surface, but I forgot to start the engines, so I had to get it with jab again and dock again. So this was a kind of mishap, but not a big deal. It has a lot of monopropellant fuel. Bye bye lander. So I wanted to leave Val and have a kind of parking orbit here where I can wait until Carreer is in position to go back. And these extra tanks still had some fuel left, so why not use them? And fixing the inclination. It doesn't cost much here, and there was still some fuel left in these tanks. So I had a lot of trouble to come up with a way to go back. So first there was a direct orbit which I was experimenting with it here. So just a direct boost there, and I could have done it that way. Actually this craft had enough fuel to do it that way, and I didn't choose that. I wanted to use one of the moons to get me a kick, and because of that I spent a lot of time on it. First to get Carreer in position, and then to get one of the moons. I had to try all three, so it turned out to be late what I wanted to use, which was kind of good because it ejected me around backwards in the orbit of Jool, so that was around okay. But I used my dial boost as a reference when to do the burn, and I was around a few days later. That doesn't change many things this far away, so it should have been okay. But in hindsight, probably this is my boost towards late. Probably because of the injection angle was not exactly in tangential direction. It boosted me in a slower orbit. So these tanks would hit late with very little fuel wasted, and no debris remaining also. So I set up this, and I had a very nice burn. Well, it was somewhat long, but the thing is, more than half of the fuel was left, and I had a proper orbit to reach Carreer. Only Carreer wasn't there. It was in the opposite side of the orbit, so I knew that it was hard to fix this. So I should have wasted this lot of time just to have this very nice elaborate plan to use a slingshot to get me there. Oh well, I still had fuel to fix this, so it turned out I have to wait a little bit. Maybe I should have done lower orbit where I was faster. I was experimenting with that here, but no, not really. I tried some slingshots with Duna and Eve, but it didn't work out. So my only choice was to wait here in this outer orbit as long as Carreer gets into position. But to get this outer orbit required a lot of delta V. So around 1300 I had to turn on the Carreer engineer, because at this point I was short on fuel. I knew that, just for the fuel readout. So around 1300 I had left when I left late. That was completely fine. I could have made it back with that much to Carreer if I had done it in the right time. But it was not the right time, so it didn't work out. I had to fix this. And this was the fix again, around 5 minutes to get there. Yeah, I had around 200 meters per second left, which is completely enough because I didn't need any additional burns. It was a hole-in-one from that distance. 25 kilometers. Or maybe there was a tiny correction for 2 kilometers. I don't remember exactly, but the 4,500 meters per second I hit the atmosphere is much lower than this capsule is rated for. It can tolerate 7,700 meters per second re-entry speeds. I tested that. So finally our heroes are back. Nothing remains just to get to the ground with the parachutes. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.